Well, it seems like even Microsoft is getting into the holiday spirit.
Yeah.
With the holidays right around the corner. This week is relatively quiet in terms of updates, but that doesn't mean we system administrators can relax.
Yeah.
There's still plenty to unpack in this latest PortalFuse weekly report.
Absolutely. Always got to stay vigilant.
Especially with those couple of Chromium-based CVEs that we saw. What do you think?
You're right. It is always good to see a bit of calm, before the holiday storm hits. But even though this week's report might seem light, those two Microsoft Edge vulnerabilities are definitely worth looking at.
Let's jump into those first then. We're looking at CVE 2024-12382 and CVE 2024-12381, both impacting Chromium-based Edge, and they can allow for arbitrary code execution. This always worries me. So how concerned should we be about these, especially considering they come from the Chromium project?
I think it's natural to assume that, since it's from Chromium, maybe it's not as pressing. But that's a dangerous way to think.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You always have to remember that while Edge is built on Chromium, Microsoft implements its own features and makes its own modifications. So there's a unique attack surface there.
Right.
So even if there's a vulnerability in Chromium itself, the way Microsoft integrated it into Edge might introduce new complexities.
That makes sense.
So you really have to rely on Microsoft's specific patches and updates. That's the only way to be sure you've mitigated these threats.
I agree. It's a good reminder that even though it's Chromium-based, we have to treat Edge vulnerabilities as seriously as any other Microsoft product. What are the specifics of these two? I know one is in the Translate feature and one in the V8 JavaScript engine, but I'm curious to hear more details.
Yeah, you're spot on there. CVE 2024-12382 is what's called a use after free vulnerability. It's in the Translate feature. What that means is that memory allocated for a function, it gets released, but it can still be accessed after it's freed.
Oh, wow.
So that potentially lets an attacker manipulate data and execute malicious code.
That's dangerous.
And the second one, CVE 2024-12381. That one's a type confusion issue in the V8 JavaScript engine.
Okay.
What happens is the engine incorrectly interprets the type of data it's processing, and that can also lead to arbitrary code execution.
So just to be clear, we're looking at two pretty serious flaws here. That could allow bad actors to take control of systems running vulnerable versions of Edge. What should we be doing to mitigate this?
Luckily for us, Microsoft already released updates to address both of them.
That's good to hear.
They came out on December 12th. For both the stable and extended stable channels of Edge, it brings Edge up to version 131.0.2903.99.
All right, so pretty simple.
So for any system admins out there, the top priority right now is to make sure all Edge installations are updated. Get them up to this latest version.
Especially with the holidays right around the corner.
That's right. You don't want to be dealing with security issues when you should be enjoying time with family.
Exactly. We want to enjoy the festive season, but we can't let our guard down when it comes to security. Patching Edge right away. That's how we make sure everyone has a secure and enjoyable holiday. So speaking of issues that need attention, let's move on to the known issues section of this report.
Sure.
So there are no new additions this week, but we still have that ongoing problem with dual boot systems running both Windows and Linux. Specifically, when the speculative store bypass mitigation setting, or SBD, is applied, this has been an issue since the August security updates.
Yeah, it has. It's been lingering for a while.
It seems to affect quite a few Windows versions, too. Windows 11 versions, 23H2, 22H2, and 21H2. And also Windows 10, 21H2. It's a little concerning that it's stuck around this long.
It is. It stems from updates KB5041585 for Windows 11, KB50415 Manios for Windows 11, 21H2, and KB5041580 for Windows 10, 21H2. All of those came out on August 13th. And even though it's been flagged as a known issue, the last update from Microsoft on it was September 20th.
So we're kind of at a holding pattern here with this dual boot issue. It definitely needs continued monitoring, especially for those managing systems with this specific configuration. But while we're on the topic of known issues, the report also mentions a fix for a WPF application problem, especially for users of certain IMEs. That's good news as we head into the holidays.
Definitely. Always nice to see some progress.
This issue has been especially problematic for users of specific IMEs, mostly impacting those using Japanese input methods.
Yeah, what's been happening is WPF applications might become unresponsive or even close unexpectedly when these IMEs are being used. It happens especially with rapid input or when interacting with IME dialogues.
Right, and if I'm understanding this correctly, the root of this problem is a timing issue, introduced in Windows updates that were released after June 25th of this year, which I guess explains why it's been so hard to pin down.
Exactly, but the good news is Microsoft has addressed this issue in the December 10th updates.
That is fantastic news. What are the specifics of these updates, and how do they fix this issue?
So for those running Windows 11 versions 22H2 and 23H2, the update is KB5048685. That brings the OS builds to 22621.4602 and 22631.4602.
Got it.
And for Windows 11 version 24H2 and Windows Server 2025, it's KB5048667, which brings the OS build to 26100.2605.
That's a pretty significant update, especially with those specific builds you mentioned. Much better than the situation with the dual boot issue. It's good to end on a positive note as we head toward the holidays.
I agree. Having a resolution for this WPF issue, it definitely makes the outlook a little brighter as we approach the holidays.
This reminds me of another point from the report, the known issue rollback, or KIR, that Microsoft is offering as a temporary workaround for those who can't implement the December updates right away.
Yeah, that's important, especially for those managing Pro and Enterprise editions of Windows 11, versions 22H2, 23H2, and 24H2, as well as Windows Server 2025.
So how does this KIR workaround address the WPF problem, and what are the steps to implement it?
Basically, it uses a special group policy. It disables that problematic behavior, the one introduced by the June updates. It's like a temporary patch, so systems can work properly until the permanent fix from the December updates can be applied.
So it's like a bridge, making sure people experiencing this problem can keep working until they get those December updates out. What are the steps for setting this KIR?
The first thing you'll need to do is download the KIR policy definition. Microsoft has it available as an MSI file. I think there's a link for it. Maybe in the show notes.
Perfect. Very convenient for our listeners. So once they have the MSI file, what's next?
You need to run the MSI to install the policy definition, and that adds it to your local group policy editor, to the administrative templates section.
Okay. We've got it installed. Now what?
Then you open your local group policy editor, and you navigate to the policy. It's called KB50404352410220351, known issue rollback. Make sure you select the right one for your Windows version.
Okay.
Once you're there, you just set it to disabled.
Seems pretty easy. Just a few clicks and we're done.
Almost. After you've set the policy to disabled, you have to restart the affected device. That way the workaround gets applied.
Restart, check. So this KIR seems pretty straightforward. For those who can't apply the December updates right now, it gives sysadmins a little breathing room, which is always appreciated around the holidays. But you said this is a temporary solution, right?
That's right. The KIR will help. But it's really important to remember that those December updates, they are the permanent fix. So use the KIR to buy some time if you need it. But make those December updates a priority.
Definitely. It's always best to go with the permanent solution, especially when it comes to security and stability. So to recap what we've discussed, patch Edge right away. Keep an eye on that dual boot issue and address the WPF application problem, either by getting those December updates out or using this KIR workaround as a temporary fix.
You got it.
Now, there's one more thing in the PortalFuse report I wanted to touch on. It's an issue with packaged apps in Windows 10 environments. It's not super widespread, but it could cause trouble for users who rely on those packaged apps. It's always good to be aware of these things.
Absolutely, especially for us.
We always need to be in the know.
Being informed is half the battle.
Exactly.
So what we're seeing is users on some Windows 10 systems are having problems updating or uninstalling certain packaged apps, especially ones using the WinApp SDK 1.6.2 package.
So this issue, it's related to that specific software development kit, the one used to package those apps.
Exactly.
And is this tied to a specific Windows update?
Luckily, it doesn't seem to be, which actually makes it a bit trickier to figure out the cause and what the solution might be.
I see. That does complicate things. So what should sysadmins be doing if their users run into this?
Right now, it seems like the impact is limited. Only a small number of users are affected, and Microsoft hasn't put out a specific fix or workaround yet. So I'd say the best approach right now is to monitor it closely and be ready to support those affected users.
So wait and see, but with a focus on being proactive with user support.
Exactly. If it starts affecting more people, Microsoft will probably release a patch or give us some clearer guidance.
It makes sense. And that's why it's so important to stay informed. Resources like the PortalFuse report are so valuable for that.
Absolutely. So to loop back to our main discussion, we've talked about a lot from this week's report. Those crucial edge vulnerabilities, the ongoing dual boot problem, the fix for the WPF issue and the workaround, and now this new issue with packaged apps on Windows 10.
It's been a good overview. I always appreciate your insights. Especially as we head into the holiday season, it's easy to get caught up in all the preparations. But we can't forget our responsibilities as system administrators.
You're absolutely right. This is a time for celebration and reflection, but it's also a good time to acknowledge that the world of cybersecurity threats is always changing, and we have to stay proactive.
Very well said. As we look forward to this time of celebration and think about peace on earth and goodwill to all, it's good to remember that we play a role in that. We keep our systems running smoothly, not just for optimal performance, but also to give our users a sense of calm and stability.
I love that. It's not just about keeping the bits and bytes flowing. It's about creating a feeling of security and normalcy, especially during a time when people are focused on family and traditions.
And in the middle of all those traditions, there we are, the sysadmins, making sure everything is running behind the scenes. So to all of our fellow sysadmins out there, here's to peaceful systems and a joyous holiday season. But before we get too caught up in the festivities, I have one more question for our listeners. So as we get ready for the holidays and look ahead to the new year, how can we, as system administrators, prepare for what's coming with cybersecurity, especially when it comes to keeping our systems stable and performing well during these busy times?
That's a really important question, and it's something we should all be thinking about. You know, the holidays are a time for celebration and relaxation, but for those of us in IT, they can also be a bit of a challenge.
For sure.
You've got increased online activity, potential staffing shortages, and the constant risk of cyber attacks, all happening at the same time.
And we can't forget about the pressure to make sure things run smoothly for our users. Nobody wants to be that person. Who causes a system outage right in the middle of holiday shopping?
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be proactive and to have a multifaceted approach. First things first. We have to really focus on the security basics.
Right.
Make sure all systems are patched and up to date. Review and strengthen your access controls. And have solid monitoring and logging practices in place.
It's like going back to basics, but with the holidays in mind.
Exactly. It's about revisiting those core security principles and making sure we're applying them carefully, especially when things are more vulnerable. On top of that, we should also think about using automation and orchestration tools. They can help us streamline our workflows and reduce the chance of human error.
Automation is always a big help, especially when we're juggling so many things and trying to stay in the holiday spirit.
It really is.
It lets us stay on top of those routine tasks, things like patch management and security scans, and that frees up our time so we can focus on the bigger picture.
I agree. And we can't forget about communication, both within our teams and with our users. Keep everyone informed about potential risks, plan maintenance, any changes to security procedures. That's all critical for keeping a secure and stable environment.
Being transparent and communicating openly, that helps build trust and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Couldn't agree more. And last but not least, let's remember that we're not in this alone. There's a whole community of IT professionals out there. We've got industry forums, online communities, vendor support, security advisories. We can use all of that to stay informed, share best practices, and work together on solutions.
It's a great reminder. Even during the holidays, we're all working together to keep the digital world safe and stable. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the PortalFuse Weekly Report, let's remember these key takeaways. Focus on security basics, use automation wisely, communicate clearly, and lean on your community for support.
I like that. And maybe most importantly, let's all take some time for ourselves to recharge and enjoy the holiday season, because a well-rested sysadmin is a more effective sysadmin.
That's great advice. So here's to a secure, joyful, and festive holiday season for all.